That's extremely frightening.
It is. It is.
So to clarify that, the eggs cannot repair the mitochondrial DNA.
No.
And so if a girl grows up with a genetic defect, she will pass that on to her daughter.
Yes.
And on, and on,
and on, and
so
on, and on, until there is no more female line left in that family.
This is surely a good enough reason to remove Wi-Fi from schools. And
Wi-Fi should be wiped out of schools at a stroke today.
Why
to protect all of the children.
Why are schools persisting in Wi-Fi if they know it's a risk?
Ignorance. It's what I call intentional ignorance. It seems that government ministers that are trying to promote the telecommunications industry and governments, and it's not difficult in our country, the UK, to find a school where if every child has their own Wi-Fi that they can walk around with, when the school inspectors come in, they get extra ticks in extra boxes.
Yeah.
And it's what I call intentional ignorance. They will only look at and believe the research they want to. They will not acknowledge most of the real research and most of the risks. And this is why I think we have this problem. There is such a pressure on advertising and hype to get this technology and then this technology and this technology. I can remember when I was a child, our king, the King of England, I can remember our king encouraging people to hold smoking parties because it was good for you. Yeah. We seem to be in that situation now. People believe that if you get the latest technology, it's going to benefit the children. What they do not do, and I call them silly boys, and I'm being disrespectful. I think our Prime Minister, and certainly the head of MI6 and our Secret Service, and I really hope he gets to look at this, they are so young that when we were making major decisions on the dangers of this, they were wondering what their nappies were for. And they have now got into the position of power, but they don't have the intelligence to come back and talk to people like me and say, look, what's the truth behind this? They listen to the government advisors, who are usually people brought in from the industry. Uh-huh. And they believe that the government advisors are right. And I have yet to find a government advisor to make a single sensible sentence anywhere. And I will defy anyone to show me an intelligent sentence from a government advisor. There seems to be so much what I call blind corruption. And you know as I do, we have just got rid of possibly the most corrupt government the world has known. And is it any wonder that we are in this situation? And I blame the Prime Minister and the head of MI6, in my mind, because they are too young, they are too ignorant, and they are too silly to come to people like me and ask what the truth is.
That's all we want, is the truth, really, isn't it? Would you like to speak to the Prime Minister personally?
As soon as we had the new government, I went straight along and saw my Member of Parliament. I gave him a document with all of the references, listing every danger there was to the planet, the ecosystems, the environment, children, embryos, that we haven't yet discussed, and I'm sorry, we should have come back to that, my fault. I asked him and I said, in case he thinks I'm just a total nutter and mad, I want to see the Prime Minister, I want to explain this, I want to take with me a consultant solicitor, I want to take with me a doctor from Imperial College, both whom are experts in radiation law and radiation, and I would like to see the Prime Minister. And to cut a long answer short, the Prime Minister does not have 20 minutes to give me in the next 4 years. And I think that is pathetic, absolutely pathetic and disgraceful.
I agree. Do they have any idea of what sort of damage they're doing to the world, to children?
No, and this is where I come back. To me, they are silly boys. You have the Prime Minister who is young, you have the head of MI6 who is young, you have these what I call young boys, with no disrespect to their age, coming out of university with these electronic degrees, and they think, aha, I can make a microwave box that will do this and do this, and they sell them and they go on the market, but they don't have the wherewithal to come back to people of my generation that grew up with microwave irradiation to say, well, just give me 1 hour of your time before you do this and let me explain what is really going on. Would you like me to go back to embryos? Or do you want
I would just like to say,
Okay.
Is there a cover-up on the numbers of cancers that we're seeing related to microwaves?
The word cover-up I would not agree with. Maybe I would. I'm not clever enough to understand the full implications. There is certainly statistical anomalies whereby I have one document where 40,000 in 1 year, 40,000 brain tumours were re-diagnosed as endocrine cancers, so they do not go on the brain tumour statistical list. So what the industry can actually say, and the government, is, okay, so you're using a phone, but look at the mobile phone brain tumour statistics, they're actually going down. And I know one person that said, this proves that they're actually preventing brain cancers.
That is most definitely a statistical anomaly.
Yes.
So 40,000 brain tumours in the UK are reclassified.
Whether they're in the UK, the document didn't say. It probably did, but it's a huge tome. And I cannot be sure whether it was one country or several countries. I just know it's from a brain tumour registry. And I just know that 40,000 are being reclassified as endocrine cancers, and the brain tumour registry is horrified by this, but I could not be specific whether it was just one country.
Okay, and that would obviously skew the statistics. If those 40,000 brain tumours are in the stats, it would be fairly blatantly obvious to most people that mobile phones are causing brain cancers.
Oh, it's only half the story. If you look at some of the studies where they have shown that there are no cancer rises from transmitters or mobile phones, what the industry and the governments are very, very good at doing is they will do a study, they will write up the study, they will give it to the press, the press will publish it. What they do not do is what I have to do. If I write a research paper, for instance, I've had one, I've just finished one. You then send it to an independent magazine for peer review. The independent magazine, they have said to me, we will now take about 8 weeks with our experts to go through every word, every reference. If we deem it okay, we will publish it. If not, we will send it back for something to be rewritten. Now, what the governments are good at doing, one government scientist will peer review another government scientist's own document. Or a government will go to a university with specific instructions for the university to carry out a specific experiment. But what they do not do is send these experiments to an independent top-level magazine like Nature and say, we found this, will you publish it? What they will do is they will give it to the press. The press bring it out the next day. Cancers are going down. Mobile phones are found to be safe. But then when you get hold of the paper, and this was one particular experiment on mobile phones, and you find they discounted everybody under a certain age. They then discounted everybody over a certain age. They discounted people who used mobile phones for work. They discounted people who had two. They discounted people for some other reason. And in fact, you ended up with this particular paper, you only ended up with 16% of the total people that were being tested being on the statistics. And then when you enlarge this 16%, it's like saying, we've looked at 16% of the people in Germany and enlarging it for the whole population and saying, cancers have gone down. It's easy to, you can manipulate statistics until you go blue in the face. They're so easy to mess around. But what they will not do is send their results to a magazine, a world-leading magazine like Nature or Scientific America or Scientific American Mind, and have them independently peer-reviewed and published, like I have to do.
Yeah. So in other words, you're saying, A, they rig the experiment, or make the experiment very favourable for themselves, and B, they cherry-pick the statistics.
Not necessarily. There are some genuine experiments that have shown that microwave irradiation has not been shown to cause illness. And I can explain this. We're in Germany now. If I made every single person in Germany smoke 20 cigarettes a day and drink 10 pints of beer a day, some people would have no effect. Some people would have some effect. Other people would be violently ill. People are not homogeneous. They do not all follow the same path. And so you can concentrate on people. There will be experiments where the majority of people have not shown an ill effect. But when you look at all of the experiments, in fact, we looked at the World Health Organization database a couple of years ago on all of the experiments, the ones that showed nothing and the ones that did show things. And the overall result was that 80%, 8 out of 10 of the papers on the World Health Organization database showed from low-level continuous microwave irradiation cancers, an increase in cancers for people living near transmitters, microwave sickness, and neurological problems. 8 out of 10. And there will always be experiments done properly that show nothing. But overall, 8 out of 10 do show something.
So if the WHO's own library of research shows that 8 out of 10 studies confirm that mobile phones, Wi-Fi, cordless phones, etc., are dangerous, what is their stance then?
The World Health Organization were challenged by the European Parliament to make a decision on the health of the world concerning all of this. And in the written reply, which I have from the European Parliament, the World Health Organization said that they will not comment on the effect on adults until 2015. They only started studying children in 2009, last year. So they will not be able to comment on the effect on children, possibly for another 15 to 20 years. So the World Health Organization will say nothing on adults until 2015 and nothing on children probably until 2020, 2025. So there is absolutely no guidance from the WHO.
So the implications of that are your children could be getting very sick, but we won't be able to tell you for another 15, 20 years.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
Absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Yep, that is it.
Kind of startling, really, isn't it?
It is so horrific that if it wasn't real, if somebody wrote a book on this, I would say this is so stupid, you could never make up a story like this. And it all goes back. It goes back to the 50s, the 60s and the 70s, when microwaves were found to be such a perfect weapon and so dangerous to the military that the United States Defense Intelligence Agency told the Western governments to keep this quiet. And they did. And this is why we have this. We have documents that show that governments pay people to experiment on people against their wishes. Well, not against their wishes, without even telling them. So, and we have all this information going back to 1976. Everything was known by 1976. Everything. We needed no more proof, no more research, nothing was needed. You see, when the industry or a government says, wow, this could be quite a problem, we will carry out research, what they're actually saying is, we really know what it's going to do, but what we will do, we will run some research. That gives us another 15 years. So we will come back in 15 years' time, and then they've bought themselves another 15 years. And if it's like the last research, so many countries disagreed over the statistical analyses of what was going on, that the whole experiment, the worldwide experiment, was considered null and void. So once they brought in the statisticians, the whole of this experiment that lasted 10 years, or not, if not 15 years, was just wiped out successfully.
Okay, Barry, so we know that microwaves damage children. What are the effects on developing babies and on embryos?
Embryos are a special case for two reasons. One is that they are the smallest type of human being. And with microwave irradiation, generally for the communication system, the smaller you are, the more radiation you absorb, because the nearer you are to the size of the areole that would receive it. And the embryo is specifically the size that can absorb quite a lot of the radiation. That is the first thing. The second is, excuse me, the second is, and I'm going to use an analogy here because I think it points out what the real problem is. If you could imagine, I'm going to talk about the embryo's brain. If you could imagine leaving here and going back to your house and picking up a magic telephone book that had the telephone numbers of every single person in Germany. Now imagine you pick up a telephone book of every single person in the world, with their cell phones, home phones, every office phones, every single person in the world. And then imagine you could push a button and all of these telephones would be dialed at the same time. That is roughly the number of connections going on in an embryo's brain every single second. That number. Wow. It is a phenomenal amount of connections with the most incredible accuracy. And if you then imagine, if that's just the brain, what about the spinal cord and all of the organs? Now, if you expose an embryo to microwave irradiation, what you are doing is you are giving the brain thousands of millions of minuscule electric shocks every single second. So if a pregnant lady uses a cell phone, the microwaves are going into the body, they will travel through the body, straight through the embryo, and if it's an ordinary cell phone, you would have roughly 1,800 million electric shocks a second, every second, going through the embryo. So they are a very special case, and the world should really take note that embryos, whatever happens, must be protected from microwave irradiation.
And what is a safe dose for an embryo to absorb?
There is no safe dose of microwave irradiation for any child anywhere in the world. No safe dose at all. Not one. There is no safe dose. It's a bit like, theoretically, passing a cigarette in to the womb and saying, have a smoke. It is that dangerous.
So what laws do the governments and the mobile phone industry hide behind?
What usually happens, if they want to come and put a transmitter outside your house or on the corner of your road or somewhere, they will usually come along, they will usually say, we follow the ICNIRP guidelines, which is the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. They say we are well within the ICNIRP guidelines, we are well within the law, there is nothing you can do about this, zonk, there it is, live with it. But in fact, they are lying. They are lying. I have travelled all over the UK and all over the world, and I have never yet met a single decision maker that has read the international certificate. Not one. And yet they will decide planning issues. You can see hospitals with transmitters above the maternity ward.
Yes.
I've never met a single person that has read it. Well, I have. And on page 546, it specifically says that decision makers should take special account of children, the elderly, the sick. It says that some people may be especially sensitive to microwave irradiation. So before any transmitter goes up, what they should really do is a survey of the area to find out how many children there are, how many pregnant ladies, how many elderly, how many sick, to find out whether they're going to affect them. And on the next page, it specifically says that decision makers should read current scientific literature, up-to-date scientific literature, and they should set an exposure standard which is below the threshold currently known to be causing illness from microwaves. What they will do is they will come along and they'll say, and I can guarantee what they have said, they will say, these are radio waves, there's no problem, we've had radio for years, we're well within the ICNIRP guidelines, zonk. And that is a lie. That is a lie. What they should show is evidence of looking at the population, evidence of reading, and why they set the level that they have set. But they don't. They set the maximum level which is allowable within the International Commission's guidelines, and all of them are set usually to the maximum guidelines. Whereas in fact they should set a minuscule level if they have read the papers, and they should show evidence of reading. You're a doctor.
Yeah.
If I came to you and said, show me evidence of your research, you would show research papers, books, writings, calculations, and convince me that you knew what you were doing. And this is what the planners would do. And if they have lied, then there may be a good legal argument for having this transmitter taken down.
It's entirely obscene that they put these things on hospital roofs when the ICNIRP says the elderly and the sick can be affected.
They tend to target, and if you look at this, people will say I'm wrong, but I don't believe I am. Have a look where most of the transmitters are. They tend to be in areas where people need money. They will choose the poor areas around cities because they know that poor people do not have the means to take on the most powerful industry on the planet and fight them. Mm-hmm. Hospitals are desperate for cash because the government keeps them poor, so they go on hospital roofs. Schools are even more desperate for cash because the government keeps them poor. So you will get them in school playgrounds because the industry will come along and say, this is safe, they're only radio waves, here's a nice check, zonk. Colleges will have them on the roof because they're poor. Universities will have them by the 100 because universities are desperately poor. So have a look and you will find that most of the transmitters are in areas where people are poor. You will be very hard pressed to find one in a wealthy person's garden.
What I wanted to ask you, Barry, was who drew up ICNIRP, and do they have any connections with the mobile phone industry?
There is a large body of government scientists, and if you look at the list, it's been published. There is a large body of the same scientists that sit on our government advisory panel, the International Commission panel, the World Health Organization panel. So it is largely the same scientists. And they have very bomb-proof qualifications. And when you have a Sir Professor standing up saying, I do not believe there is proof for this, that is all the councils need. Yes. You know, compared to somebody like me, that is all the councils need. And they will say, well, we'll go with Sir Professor. But you will find it has been published, but you will find the same names appearing on the same lists.
Thank you. So from a legal point of view, is there any way that people can have transmitters removed? Have you had any successes with having transmitters removed?
We have had successes with having them moved, and there are several legal arguments here, and I'm not trained in law, so I'm assuming that what I say is correct. There are a few legal arguments. Some of the decision makers say to the populations that they are not required to consider health in planning decisions, especially the UK. That contravenes the European law. There are 2 European laws which say health must be considered, and it must be a major consideration. There is a United Nations law under the United Nations Charter, number 22, that says persons with disabilities, i.e. electrosensitivity, people who are sensitive to microwaves, they cannot be discriminated against. So if you go to a road and you go, zonk, there is a transmitter, I'm sorry that 3 in 100 of you, and it may not be 3 in 100, it may be the Irish Doctors Association, who are an incredibly clever and knowledgeable group of doctors, and are really tip-top when it comes to radiation. They believe it may be as high as 15 in 100. So when the industry puts up a transmitter and says, I'm sorry, you're electrosensitive, you're just going to have to suffer or move, under United Nations law, that is illegal. They cannot do that. And we have drawn up in this country, the Nuremberg Treaty. And the Nuremberg Treaty was signed by all of the nations of the world. And it is a very specific treaty. And what it says is that no human being will be experimented upon without his or her consent. And before they give consent, they have the legal right to understand all of the implications, the health problems, the future health problems, and they have the legal capacity to say no. There is only one exception with the Nuremberg Treaty, and that is a doctor such as yourself may experiment on his or herself only. That is the only exception. It is section 5. So no human being is allowed to be experimented upon. Now, what the World Health Organization have said is that they are watching the adult population till 2015, the children's population from 2009. They are watching to see how many cancers, how many illnesses, how much neurological damage. It is a scientific health medical experiment. And in their wording, you can read that it is an experiment, the wording they gave to the European Parliament. So what I would suggest to countries or people, they can, and again, I'm not trained in law, but I would argue that they can invoke the Nuremberg Treaty and say, I do not wish to be a part of this global experiment. We signed the treaty, and therefore you are breaking international law. That is my interpretation of what can be done. There is also one environmental law which very few people know of. I think it was published in 2004, but seemed to have been lost and buried. But it is definitely there. And it's a very good one. It actually says that anybody who damages an environmental water supply, a habitat, an environment, any animals, any nature conservatory, what's the word I'm looking for? Any nature conservation area, any any nature conservation area, they say that is against European law now to damage any ecosystem, any environment. It is against European law. And it says the causer will pay the principal. In other words, if we have caused the bees to die, the crops to fail, the farm animals to die, the whole of the reparation bill can be sent straight to the mobile industry if they are taken to court and it is proven in front of a jury that they are guilty. They can be made to pay the principal. And not many people know that law exists, but it is law and it exists, and I have a copy of it.